I need some traction.
All right. Hey, Traction fam. Our guest today is an entrepreneur, investor, coach, and a leader who knows the SaaS world from the inside out through nearly 2 decades of startup experience. He is the creator of the perfect deal process, which has created growth patterns that led to multiple 8 and 9-figure exits. He now helps founders and leaders of B2B SaaS companies from around the world to turn their demo process into a conversion machine. Ooh, I like the sounds of that. And so we're going to dive into how to double your sales call rates with a simple 4-step process, how to create powerful emotions in your buyer's mind so they close fast, and 3 metrics you should be tracking that will help you close more sales. What we end up doing as startup founders and as leaders in startups especially is we keep jamming the top of the funnel, more leads, more email addresses. But if you can just improve the funnel metrics, right, the close ratio, some of these other things, then we can do more with less. So I'm super excited to have Matt Wolach here, sales coach and founder, CEO of Zealous. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely, Lloyd. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Fantastic. So before we get into all these tactics of literally exploding your sales funnel beyond the let's jam more leads, let's throw more SDRs. No, let's improve the close ratio by 20, 30, 40, 50%. How about that? And then you can do more with less. You need less SDRs. But how did you get into sales, man? What's your backstory?
Yeah, so it kind of just, I fell into it, amongst a partnership team and a startup. It was one of those things where it's like, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm like, well, I guess I'll just be the one who does the marketing and the sales. And it's so funny how that happened, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I, was pretty confident based on previous experiences of doing some things pretty well, but I did not know sales. I'd never been trained in it, did not know what I was doing, and I failed miserably right away. And it was so frustrating, and it was very scary because we put a lot of effort and money into this startup, and now we weren't really selling. And it was one of those things, it's like, are we going to have to go get real jobs? And that was worrisome, but fortunately I buckled down and didn't give up. And I started to learn as much as I can and read all kinds of books and articles and sought out mentors and didn't really ever find the right answer. But once I started to understand that, hey, if I take a piece of this and put it in, if I take part of this and plug that in, I can start to create my own process. And from that, when we put that in place, boom, we started taking off and we saw exponential growth. We started to get amazing results. We started to have really some crazy things happen, including all kinds of investors coming to us, everybody wanting to buy us. And we saw a lot of really cool things happen, and it led to a dream exit. And so what I do now is I help other people understand how to do the same thing. How can they apply that process to get similar results for their own company?
I can sense a lot of passion and energy in your voice when you talk about this. When passion meets profession, you become Michael Jackson. And what's funny is, I think we talked about it when I was in your podcast, is if you don't love your audience and the craft or whatever you're writing, creating about the audience, the craft, you can't sustainably create. So it shows how much love you have for your craft that despite the exit, instead of hanging on a beach somewhere, you continue to create for this audience. So kudos, man, kudos. Now, what inspired this unique approach to closing deals though? Because we're so used to like jamming more data at the top of the funnel, right? Like what was some insight or some example or some scenario you encountered in your previous company that helped you come across this approach? Right?
Yeah,
everything seems like you're throwing spaghetti on the wall when you're going through it, but when you look back and have some success, it's a framework. So tell us how you landed on that.
Yeah, that's so true. And you're absolutely right, Lloyd, because in the early days of a startup, you're like, oh no, we built this thing. Is anybody going to ever hear of us? Is anybody going to come to the site? Are they going to see any of the posts we make? We might not ever get any leads, right? You get really worried and scared. It's kind of funny. And so I felt the same thing. So I'm like, let's go generate a whole bunch of leads. And I went out and did all this work and we spent some money and we started to get some leads. And then, I didn't know what to do or how to close them or what to say to them and how to get them excited about signing up for the product. And we couldn't really close any of them. And I'm like, oh man, well, I just spent all this time and effort and money on all these leads, and now we're not closing. That's pretty scary. And so I realized I had done it backwards, because if you spend all of this effort and all this money and time on generating leads and then you can't close them, you just wasted a whole bunch of effort and money and time. And so I realized, let's do it the right way. And what I'll do is, let's fix the sales. Let's make sure the sales process is absolutely rock solid, so that if somebody comes across our desk and they're excited and they want us to get started, we know exactly how to handle that relationship, exactly how to go through those sales calls, those interactions, so that people take their modest level of excitement and amp it up, so that through this process they realize, this is what I need. I need this product. I have to have this service. I've got to get started as soon as possible. And too many times people view sales as, yeah, maybe I'll just kind of show them a couple things and maybe it works for them. But no, we need to get their emotions rocking. We need to get them amped, and we need to make sure that they know this is the solution for them. So once I understood I needed to fix sales, I needed to get that right, I put that process in place. We started to be able to close the leads we were getting. And now that we knew we were closing, now we can go out and we can really crush the marketing and get all kinds of leads and get all kinds of lead generation happening. This is a perfect, my story is a perfect example of that. Another one is my client, Paul. He was at a 26% close rate on his demos he was doing for his software company. He was frustrated with that. I showed him some process. We plugged in some really cool techniques. He got that close rate from 26% to 87%. He's closing almost 9 out of every 10 calls he makes. And now he's doing the close rate so well that they can go out and spend the money and put effort into marketing, because they know they're going to close. Those leads that they drive, they're going to eventually get that deal in the door. And so their company's taking off, and it's really fun to watch.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So let's dive right in, right? Firstly, why do you think so many people, especially in the startup space, are obsessed with jamming more data at the top of the funnel?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's something that you feel, you get scared. Like I said, like I was, are we ever going to get anybody to hear of us? Are we going to get our name out there? Are we going to have, and that's a good fear, because it used to be 20 years ago, if you built a software, there wasn't a ton of competition. A lot of people would find you. It was harder to build the software than it was to get people to come. Now it's the opposite. Building software is easy. There's all kinds of teams. There's all kinds of no code and low code, and getting it up to market is pretty quick and easier. Not easy, but easier than it was. But now there's so much competition. In fact, I saw a statistic 10 years ago, there were 2.7 competitors on average for every software company. And now it's over 10 competitors on average for every software company. So there's no, if you build it, they will come anymore. You need to build it, and then you need to make sure you put in the right process to generate those leads. That is a very normal understanding. We just need to know that, hey, before you start generating leads, let's get the sales process nailed, so that if that big, awesome lead comes to you, you're not going to waste it. And I always ask people, hey, when should you start understanding how to sell? Well, let me ask you, if one of the perfect fit, big, huge companies in your industry comes to you and wants to look at this, do you want to be prepared for that conversation or not? And everybody's like, well, I need to be prepared for it. We need to make sure we can close them if that happens, because you only get one chance. If they come to you and you fail and you don't do well, they're always going to remember that. They're never going to think that you got better over time. So get it right from the start.
Fantastic. Awesome. So let's dive first into this 4-step method for doubling sales call close rates, right? We're making lots of calls. Look at the metrics right now in GTM teams, especially outbound, right? Number of calls, number of emails, number of connects. Like basically it's all activity based. But how do you double that?
Yeah. So what I really want to focus on is, once you get a connection with somebody, how can you make sure they sign up? Because you're right, you're putting so much effort at the top of funnel, getting your team to go outbound and make all these calls. How do you ensure that if you did that effort, that once you have that, you're going to get them closed? And so what I came up with was a process I called the perfect deal process, as you mentioned before, Lloyd. The perfect deal process, DEAL, is an acronym. and they all mean something. And it makes it really easy to understand how to incorporate this process into your own sales funnel, into your own sales calls. So let's go through each of those, and I'll kind of explain what each of the letters means. So we start with D. D stands for discovery, and it's really critical. This is foundational for your entire sales call and all the interactions that's going to happen from this point. Discovery, some people call it qualification, some call it needs analysis. I like discovery, but essentially what it is learning from your buyer everything in their world right now. What are they worried about? What do they hope for? What keeps them up at night? What do they dream for? All those things that are major challenges, all those things that are goals for them, and all about what they're trying to accomplish. And understanding this is critical. Now, most people in sales anyway, they realize that discovery is important, but many don't understand just how important it is. In fact, what we have found is that most people look at discovery and they are only doing one of the main reasons for discovery. They only understand the one main reason, when in fact there are 4 reasons for doing discovery. And so the one that they think about is discovery is to find fit. You want to make sure that this buyer is going to fit within your company, that they're going to be a good customer. And that's great. And a lot of people know that that is important. And so they look for fit. Now, the problem is most people, once they find that there's a fit, they stop discovery. They stop asking the questions. They realize, okay, they're a good fit. Let's move on. Let me start selling them. And that's a problem because discovery is not only for you. There's other reasons that we want to do discovery. And one of the main reasons is the buyer needs to feel emotional about their problem. And so number 1 is we need to find fit. Number 2 is we need to connect with the buyer. So we need them to feel that personal connection to us. People buy from people. And too many times we jump on a call, let me explain my product. We never talk about who we are. We never share any details about how we can help them or our experience. And they never really connect with us. They never really think that we get them. And so we need to find that connection. Number 3 is we need to make sure they know what we're talking about. They need to trust us. They need to believe in us as a seller, that we understand them. And a lot of people are like, so I have to just explain all my background and say how I know everything? No, actually you don't. The way that they can trust us and feel that we get them, that happens through the questions you ask. The way you ask the questions, the lingo that you use, the verbiage you use, that will show that you know this industry, right? You get them, you understand them, that you're part of the industry. You can get all of that across just with the right questioning. And then, of course, when they answer, you dive into those answers. And how you do that shows them you absolutely know what you're talking about. So we definitely need to make sure that they trust us. And the last reason for doing discovery is to get them feeling emotional about their situation. They should, I tell my clients this all the time, they should enter the call saying, hey, we're kind of interested in looking at your product, and leave that call saying, whoa, we had no idea we were in such bad shape. We need to solve this right now. And if you can do that, your sales process is in really good shape. But all of that happens with great discovery. And one of the ways I can illustrate this emotion thing, Lloyd, is I have an analogy, and it's a little gruesome. It's my knife analogy. And so I want to share my knife analogy with you. And it really makes it easy for you to understand what you need to do within your sales process to get buyers feeling that emotion and understanding how bad their pain is. So I look at it, and there's 3 steps to pain. And with those 3 steps, there are 3 levels of sellers who do those. So level 1 is what many sellers do. And that's where you're going to have kind of the beginning seller people, the salespeople who are not quite experts. And level 1 is a buyer comes to you and they say, hey, my shoulder hurts. I need help. Now, obviously, it's probably not their shoulder, it's something about their business, but this is the analogy. So my shoulder hurts. I need help. Now, a level 1 seller, in their head, they might think, okay, they asked for the shoulder. I see, though, that they have a knife in their belly. So that's not good, but they must not care about that. They asked me about the shoulder. That's the wrong way to approach it. We need to be experts. As sellers, we need to be their consultant and their guide. And we need to make sure we point out things to them that they may not know. And so that buyer may not know about that knife that's sticking out of their gut. And they might just think that the shoulder is the problem when really they've got a bigger, worse issue. But level 1 sellers will keep that inside. They'll say, well, let me just solve the problem they said they have. And so they try to solve it. And the problem is that shoulder was never really that big of a deal to them. It's not really hurting them. It's not hampering them or killing their business. And so because of that, we don't make a sale. They don't have enough motivation to take action. And so we lose the deal. Level 2 sellers understand this and they realize that, hey, we need to be better than that. And so if they come to me talking about their shoulder, but I see the knife in their gut, I'm going to point it out. And so level 2 sellers, well, yeah, that shoulder doesn't look great, but you've got a knife in your belly. That's going to kill you. And the buyer might say, oh yeah, you're right. So I do. I didn't even recognize that. Thank you for helping me out with that. And so level 2 sellers do a better job of getting them to identify it. But they do something very bad at that point that kills the deal. And what they do is they want to pull the knife out. Let me save you. I'll pull the knife out. And they do that by explaining their product. Oh, our product solves that because you're going to get this and it does this and it has this cool thing and that amazing thing. Don't do that. We don't want to pull the knife out at this point. I know in a real world situation, of course, help them. But in a sales situation, we can't pull the knife out at this point because, again, they haven't felt how bad it is yet. And if they don't feel how bad the situation is, they're not going to want to take action. A perfect illustration of this is the statistic that 80% of the deals you lose, 80% of the deals you lose are not lost to your competition. 80% of the deals you lose are lost to inaction. The buyer does nothing. They don't choose a competitor. They don't go to somebody else. They just don't do anything. So our number one goal is we need to just get them to move, just take action. And if we pull the knife out right there, they're going to feel like, oh, it wasn't really a problem. I'm not going to do anything. And that's bad. And so what we need to do is get to level 3. Level 3 sellers, they identify the problems themselves. They see, oh, it's not the shoulder, it's the knife. They also make sure that the buyer identifies it. Hey, you've got the knife in your gut. Oh yeah, so I do. But what a level 3 seller does that only 3% of sellers do. So this is an elite tactic. If you start doing this, you are now in the elite realm. What they do is instead of pulling the knife out, they twist the knife and they make sure that the buyer understands how bad the pain is. Now, I'm not advocating for you doing this in the real world. Don't twist knives on people. And I'm also not advocating that sales, we need to be evil and bad. No, we want to be helpful. But in order to be helpful, sometimes people need to understand how bad their situation is. They need to get how bad their problem is. If they don't fully grasp the depth of the challenges that they're in, they're not going to want to take action. If they don't truly understand how bad things are, they're never going to move and they're never going to buy your product. So elite sellers, they don't pull the knife out at this point. They twist the knife and they make sure that that buyer feels the pain. And we can do this by saying things like, wait, what? So you're spending how much on this situation? And last year you put how many units into this? And you did this, and you question their answers. The answers they give you, don't stay with them. Actually harp on that. And when you start doing that and you start diving into these and the way you react by saying things like, wait, what? They're going to know, since you talk to people like them every day, that they must be behind everybody else. And when they start realizing they're behind, they're going to get really worried. And so how you respond, how you react to what they say, absolutely matters. The best sellers are doing this extremely well. They're closing a ton of deals because they twist the knife and they make their discovery extremely powerful. They get buyers very emotional. Is this making sense, Lloyd?
Yes, definitely. And what I want to do now actually is maybe go through some sample probing questions one might ask at each of those stages as they talk to people, right? Maybe let's pick, I don't know, any scenario. Let's say I'm selling, I don't know, some typical B2B SaaS software to an enterprise buyer. What are some questions, 2 or 3, that you might ask at like a DEAL phase?
Sure. Yeah, so exactly. One of the best question types I love is process questions. And so many times we're like, well, how many people do you have? And if you're selling like a CRM, how many contacts are in your database and how many emails you send? Of course, you need that stuff. But we also want to get deeper and we want to figure out, hey, what are you doing right now? What's the process? Because if you truly know your buyers, which you should, being a seller, you should understand the market. If you know the buyers, you know where the main hangups are. Where are people struggling? in this industry. So you know, if you're speaking to one buyer, that they're likely bad at this thing, or they're not doing it at all. They're not doing it, or they're bad. And so you can ask a question around that. And all you do is ask a process question. Hey, if this happens, how do you handle it today? And now they're going to have to explain something that's very bad. Oh, that's a bad day when that happens. I have to get Mary. She has to go over and start working on this. And she does this. Okay, so what does she do? Make them explain it all. And then how long does Mary spend on that? Oh, 3 or 4 hours. And how many times does this happen? 2 or 3 times a week. Wait. So she's spending like 10 hours a week on this? Whoa. And now they're like, wait, wow, yeah, I didn't even realize that. And how much are you paying Mary? We're paying her $50,000 a year. Okay, calculate. You can do it right there in front of them. So you're spending $12,000 on this little thing. That's it. 12,000? Yeah, I never calculated that. Thanks for calculating that for me. I never realized it. Now they're hurting. And just by asking this process question, you uncovered stuff that other people would never be able to get to. And now they see you as a guide and advisor. You help them understand this better. They're going to love to work with you. Does that help?
Definitely. I love that, where you ask some situation questions, you're diving into the problem, and you're basically asking them to quantify their pain, right? And then they internalize it, they think about it, and you pause, and then they bring themselves to the realization that, oh, this is a problem here. Let's work together now to solve it. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. That. So we've got the D, that's discovery. So E is educate. And this is where we need to now educate them on usually a transformation that's going on in the industry. Again, if you can position yourself as an advisor, as a consultant, then they're going to look up to you and they're going to see you as somebody who can help them. And so the best way to do that is talk about some sort of shift that's happening that they may not be aware of. For example, if we were selling back in the early 2000s, we may have gone to Blockbuster and said, hey, people are moving online. You need to get online as soon as possible or else you're in trouble. There's other companies, Netflix, who's already doing this. You need to catch up. And so we need to identify that within our own industries. What is that thing, that shift that's happening that they need to learn about so that they realize they don't want to be with the losing group. They want to be with the winning group. And if we can educate them as such, again, that scares them into action. They realize I need to take action on this. And again, that gives you more opportunity for them to move towards your product. So that's the E, educate. That brings us to A. A is associate. Associate means let's connect our solution to their problems. So once we've discovered them, we've learned all about them, we know what their challenges are, their goals are. Now we need to connect how our solution solves those things. And this is where you would be demoing your product or explaining your service, and you talk about all the different ways that it solves those specific things. The key here is don't talk about everything it does. Talk about what they care about. Talk about how they told you this was a big pain point. You hit that thing hard, but then you skip those other things they didn't even mention. And this is where a lot of people fail, is they just have one stock way of explaining everything, which will hit some points, but it's boring in the other points. And so they'll fall asleep and they won't hear the other good points that you have. We need to associate and tailor what we're talking about to them and their specific needs. It's absolutely critical.
You know, I have a very funny story to share. So all my career, I've only worked alongside founders. And, you know, like I always say, you become the average of the 5 people around you. So when the time came, when I hit a ceiling, I became a founder myself. But nonetheless, early in my career, I was working with this founder. And he was so into all the bells and whistles in the software. Like every time I demo, I basically understand the pain points, right? Like I'd walk through a basic deck and try to like outline some problems and ask them, hey, does this resonate? Like, you know, are you facing some of these challenges? Basically understand a day in their life and figure out like what are some key troubles they're facing and how do they solve it today? So, and I'd basically say, hey, before I jump into the demo, could I ask you a few questions to understand your key challenges? Because we can't go through an hour-long demo. You can't sit through it. I can't sit through it. I want to just show you the things that are relevant for you. And so I did that. And then we had this big prospect call, a large company, probably like 100 million revenue company. So it would have been a big customer for us. And so we're on this demo call now. And, I asked him the questions and I'm showing them relevant things. And he's like nudging me. He's like, you're not showing them this bell and this whistle and this shiny widget. This is what happens a lot of the times when engineers, right, start companies. I'm an engineer too, but luckily my first job was in sales. But nonetheless, he's going. So I'm like, okay, why don't you take over the demo? So he takes over the demo and he's going. Like 40 minutes have passed, okay? And all of a sudden now my phone is blowing up. I keep my phone down always on calls. So, and it's always silent. I pick up the phone because I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. Like this guy just is not shutting up. Like you're not even pausing to get a reaction. Like it's dead silent on the other side. So I move my phone to see the time and there's like 6-7 missed calls. And then I see an email saying, guys, can you let us back in? We got disconnected from the demo like 20 minutes ago.
Oh no. Oh no.
I'll never.
Oh man, that's horrible.
So I spoke for maybe 10 minutes. He spoke for 10 minutes and then went on another 30. So they had literally disconnected 10 minutes after him speaking. And he was basically talking to the wall for 30 minutes, giving every bell and whistle. And when I told him that, he was just so dejected, right? And so this, what you said, is a very, very important point. You want to understand their their top 3 top priorities, the top pain points, and tailor your solution versus showing them thing.
Exactly. And we should be checking in. Like it shouldn't be one long monologue. We need to check in. There's 3 types of check-ins. We need to check for understanding. Hey, is this all making sense? That breaks up the monologue. That lets them jump in. That lets you realize they fell off the call, apparently. And we need to make sure that they're feeling good about this. We need to check for understanding. We need to check for comfort, and we need to check for value. Hey, do you feel like this is something that's going to help you? Doing those check-ins breaks up your long spiel, but also gives them opportunities to voice any questions or concerns.
Awesome. And what is the L now?
So the L stands for lead, and it doesn't mean like generate leads. It means you take charge. You lead the conversation. You lead the process. And this is something where a lot of people trip up. We think that in sales, we're to be subservient and we're just going to serve their every need. However, they're coming to us because they're the experts. We need to be the ones in control of the entire process. Not only will that build their confidence in us and their trust in us, but it'll allow us to get through the process quickly and get to the end result as fast as possible. Now, we need to be in control, even if it's a big, important company that we're serving. In fact, one of my clients one time, he's like, well, okay, I get it. I need to be in control. But I was selling to this Fortune 500 and the CEO was on the call. And so if he says he needs to do this, I just let him do it, right? I'm like, well, let me ask you this. How many times have you been through your sales process? He's like, oh, a couple hundred at least. How many times has he been through your sales process? Well, this is the first. And right there, it hit him. He realized that he understands exactly how this whole thing should go because he's done it hundreds of times, but the CEO has never done it. So even though they're a big, powerful, important CEO, they don't know your process and they don't know the best way to get your product. So take control, own the process, and make it happen. And it's very, very important. You've got to have that lead capability if you're going to get anything done. One of the best ways, by the way, to do this is set the next steps. So once you've understood from them, like who needs to be involved, you should get that in discovery. You should understand who all the different stakeholders are, decision makers and all that. Now you can set those next steps at the end of the call. Say, hey, earlier you told me we got to talk to the CFO to get it budget approved. Let's set up that meeting right now. You also mentioned your IT team needs to make sure it's going to integrate okay. Let's set up that meeting right now. Get those steps on the calendar. And once you do, it's going to be much more likely that things happen. Don't just say, hey, let me know how things go and I'll talk to you soon. I'll give you a call in a couple of weeks. They're going to be gone because as soon as they get off the call, their priorities change. They get an email about this fire. They get somebody yelling them about that. And all of a sudden, this thing that was a hot priority and they were excited about now is priority number 7 on their list. They've got other things to take care of. We need to keep that happening. We need to make sure we're in control. We need to lead the process. So that's something that I'm constantly making sure my clients are doing.
What are some things that might go stray when you're trying to lead the process, and how do you bring it back on track?
Yeah. So first of all, you might have people who don't understand that you need to lead. So you might have a very strong prospect who says, oh, well, why don't you just show us this? We need to make sure that we're still in control. Now, if they ask to be shown something and it fits, do it. Don't not do it just because you want to be in control. But if it's not the right time for that, or it's not something that needs to be shown, or not something that is applicable, you need to step up and take charge and say, actually, that's not applicable. What I want to show you is something that's much more fitting for your situation. And a lot of times you're going to get, and the way we can handle it is most of the buyers, 80, 90%, are going to be good with that once you explain it once. But then they might push back. And so what I do, especially if you're in, say, discovery and you're asking them all these questions, you're going to get buyers who say, forget the questions, just show me the product, show me what you got. Right? I'm sure you've seen that, Lloyd, where people are like, hey, skip all these questions. I don't really care. Just show me the product. And one of the best things that I do is after I've explained, like, it's important, we need to do this, if they still don't get it and they still push, I say, hey, have you ever gone into a doctor's office? And in that doctor office, he immediately walks up to you as soon as you walk in, starts taking out a knife and starts cutting you open. No, they need to understand what's wrong. And so they give you a form and you fill out all these questions so they can learn what's going on. And then you get in the room and then they will ask you all the questions all over again. They go through a lot of discovery to learn about what's going wrong with you. Same thing with us. We can't just take out a scalpel and start operating. We need to make sure we understand truly what's wrong so we can give them the right prescription. And I explain that analogy when people start pushing and they get it, they understand it. I can't give you the right prescription if I don't know exactly what's wrong. I don't even know if this is the right system for you, if this is the right fit. I want to make sure it's right for you, and then I'll show you exactly what's pertinent to you so it takes the least amount of time and saves your day. Does that sound good?
Awesome.
Cool.
And yeah.
They're usually right on it.
Fantastic. Now, what are some common objections you see towards the end of the sales cycle, and how do you overcome them?
So you might have objections regarding certain product issues. You might have objections to the support and training process. You might have objections to, of course, cost. There's a lot of ways to do it. But here's one really cool technique that I learned from a mentor a long time ago that really works well. It's called feel, felt, found. Feel, felt, found is a great objection response technique. And what it does is it's basically something you can say and they don't even understand you're using a technique on them. So it goes like this. I understand why you feel that way. Others like you have felt the exact same way. But what they have found is that when you go through the process this way, you get these results. And so feel, felt, found is beautiful because one, I understand why you feel that way. You're giving them that empathy so they feel, valid in what they're feeling. Others have felt the same way. So that says, hey, it's not new. You're not unique. You're like others. But it also has them grouping themselves with these other people. And now they'll put them in that group. And you're all about community, Lloyd. You know the power of a group, especially if somebody feels like they're part of that group. So others have felt the same way, puts them in that feeling of, okay, there's other people like me. And then when you say, but they have found, now they're going to feel like they are finding the same thing. And so you're able to explain the actual true result or the true answer. What they have found is this. And so something like that, a price. Hey, I feel like your price is just too high. Oh, I understand why you feel that way. In fact, others have felt the same way about the pricing. But what they have found once they got started is that that price was nominal compared to the amount of savings that they had in fewer staff and much greater efficiency. In fact, let me tell you about my friend Steve. He just emailed me last week, his success. And so boom, 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 you tell the story about Steve. And now they're like, okay, well, that cost response was not very valid. Sounds like it's going to be a good result.
Cool. Now, in terms of metrics you watch for in terms of improving close rates, right? Because a lot of the metrics we talk about in sales is creating more pipe, it's top of the funnel, but very little has been told, especially in the startup sphere, about bottom of the funnel in close rate improvement. So what are the top 3 metrics for improving these close rates? And what do you watch like a hawk? What do you stay on top of, especially if you're a startup VP sales?
Yeah, great question. And one of the things I look at is right after that lead generation, it's the lead to first call rate. And you'll be surprised at how many companies don't track this, Lloyd. That lead to first call rate. When somebody says, okay, I'm interested, tell me more, let's get them booked. Now, the problem is we're not very good at booking them. In fact, the industry average across all of software, that's where I work, all of software industry average of a lead who says, I'm interested. We're not talking about somebody who like downloaded a sample of your book or watched a video. Somebody who actually says, I'm interested. The industry average of that person showing up on a first call is 45%. Less than half of the people who said, I need to talk to somebody actually ever talk to somebody, which is crazy. And it's all because of our bad process. We do not jump on that lead fast enough. There's a concept called speed to lead, which means we need to get to that lead fast. If they say, hey, I want to talk, get on it right away. Less than 10 minutes is what we should do. Some people are like, oh, we'll get to them within a day or within a couple hours. We need to be within 10 minutes. Secondly, we need to have process around what if they don't respond, which happens a lot. So we can't just send them one email and hope that they respond and book a call. We need to call, email, back and forth, text them, message them on social, have a process around getting to them. And even better, have a person responsible for it. If you're getting 20, 30 plus inbound leads, you should have somebody solely responsible for getting those leads and getting them booked into a call with somebody else. And so that first metric of lead to first call rate is critical. Now, once you start putting in the right process, that can go from that 45% average I said to about 80% plus. In fact, I have a client doing 94% because they have a brilliant process around it. They have an LDR team, which is a lead development rep team. And their whole goal is we get a lead, we're harping on them, we're jumping on them, we're making sure we book them. We're going to call them and bug them until they actually book. And they're booking 94% of those leads that come in. So that's number one. You've got to have a very strong lead to first call rate.
Awesome. What is number 2 and 3?
Yeah, number 2, I would say, is CAC Payback. So if you're looking at making sure that your company is going to be very strong, especially in an early stage, you've got to understand your CAC, which is your CAC, customer acquisition cost. What that means is how much are you spending in sales and marketing and all that stuff you're doing to acquire customers. And so you take the entire spend. Let's say you spent $20,000 this month on sales and marketing and all the ads and all the stuff, and you acquired 2 customers. That means it's $10,000 CAC, $10,000 per customer to acquire each one. That's what you spent. So that customer acquisition cost is really important to know. Now, what's CAC Payback? CAC Payback is, okay, if you spent $10,000 per customer, based on how much they spend with you every month, how much you generate from them in revenue, how long does it take for them to become profitable for you? So if they're paying you $1,000 a month and you spent $10,000 to get them, then it's 10 months is your CAC payback. If it's $10 a month, then it's a lot of months for your CAC payback. And what we're looking at is we want this CAC payback metric to be under 12 months. So we want to be able to start getting profitable on this new customer before the 12-month mark. So if you spent $10,000 as your CAC and they pay you $1,000 a month on average, then it's going to be a 10 CAC payback, which is less than 12. That's great. But let's say you spent the $10,000 and they're only paying you $500. That's a 20 CAC payback, and that's not great. That is very difficult because you might have a lot of people leaving you. You might have a lot of churn in that time, which means you'll never make as much money as you spent. You'll never get that money back from them for what you spent to get them. So that CAC payback period is a really important metric that a lot of people don't track.
Awesome. And the final one?
The final one is LTV to CAC. So that's your lifetime value to the CAC ratio. So we already know CAC, but lifetime value is how much is this new customer going to be worth to you over the course of their entire life with you. So based on how much they spend with you on average, let's say it's that $1,000, and then you want to look at how long the average customer stays with you. There's a calculation in that based on your churn rate, but essentially let's say it's like 3 years. So over the course of 3 years, if they're paying you $1,000 a month, they're going to spend $36,000 over those 3 years. What we want to look at is that lifetime value, that $36,000 we just calculated, versus the CAC. And so if our CAC was $10,000 in this example, and we're getting $36,000 for them over the course of their life, That's a 3.6 to 1, 36,000 to 10,000, 3.6 to 1 ratio. That is a good ratio. Good ratios for lifetime value to your CAC is 3 to 1 or more. So if you're only getting 2 to 1, meaning you put in $1 into your marketing and sales and you get $2 back, that's not good enough because you have other things to spend on outside of just marketing and sales. You've got development, you've got all of the human resources stuff, you've got all these other expenses. You're not going to make money. If we're going to put $1 in the machine, we need to get at least $3 back. So a lot of people are like, well, great. I'm at 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1. Well, that's fantastic. You're getting a lot of return on your marketing and sales spend, but it's not perfect because what that means is you need to spend more. If you're getting a 10 to 1 LTV to CAC ratio, put more money in the machine because you can scale faster because you know you're making it happen. You've got great close rates, you're getting deals in, and you're very successful.
That's why I like channels that give you the lowest possible CAC payback period, less than 6 months if possible. It's phenomenal. And if you can bring your CAC payback period to near zero, then you can sign any size of client. It doesn't matter, I guess. Right?
Exactly. And that's why a personal brand like the brand you've built is fantastic because essentially once you've built that, it's not a lot of money to spend on marketing. It's a lot of just brand recognition. It's a lot of, posting and such, and people come to you and you're generating leads and getting money because of your presence, because of your personal brand, and you're not having to really outlay that much. So your CAC payback is going to be tiny. Your LTV to CAC is going to be giant.
Definitely. Now, one thing I have a question on is, a lot of people, especially in the startup space, we just hire for volume, I feel, right? Like, we hire for logos or we hire to fill seats for volume. What are the traits of a great account executive and a great sales leader?
Yeah, it's a great question because they can be different. And a lot of times we try to find sales leaders from account executives that were good, but those are very different roles. An account executive is very individually focused, right? They're worried about their own book of business and taking care of this deal and this deal and this deal and making sure that they meet their own quotas. But the sales leader needs to be thinking about everybody and how the team dynamic works and how everybody comes together and how that fits in the rest of the organization. And so it's very not individually focused. It's very team focused. And so it's a very different mindset. And that's one of the toughest things is getting somebody to go from that account executive role into a leadership role. And a lot of them don't make it. And you probably have several examples of times that you've seen that as well, Lloyd, where people don't make that transition very well. And some people just don't do well as a leader, even though they were a great account executive. What do I look for? Account executives, I need somebody who's hungry, somebody who's going to want to win deals. I not only should they be hungry for the money, but I like competitive fire. I want somebody who wants to win, somebody who wants to beat the competition, because the money's great in sales, but having that internal desire to win and want to make things happen for the company is great. But beyond that, they also have to know how to take great care of people. So I've had people come from a customer service background and be great at sales because they're trying to help them. They're trying to solve their problems. The best sellers are usually the best helpers. How can we help this person overcome their challenges and solve their issues? Those are the people who I've seen turn into great sellers because your buyer can sense when you're trying to sell them versus you're trying to help them. And if you're really focused around helping, if you're focused around, hey, how can I get you to solve these problems? How can I show you how to do this? And by the way, the product might be the best way, then they're going to trust you and believe in you and want to work with you.
Definitely. Now, what are some key things when you hire these salespeople, right? To watch out for and making sure that they are onboarded well and they're following this whole process to close more deals faster?
Yeah, I think that's critical. You need people who are going to be able to follow a process. And one thing to watch for is, hey, first of all, let's not just kind of let them go and hope that things work out. Let's stay with them. Let's coach them. Let's support them. Give them what they need so they continue to grow, continue to learn within the process and within the company so that they can be very successful. A good rep can be ramped up within a month. But again, it takes some effort. And too many times we bring on a bunch of people, we just kind of throw them to the wolves, and we take the best ones and get rid of the worst ones. But there's better ways of doing it. Like, why can't we work with them and role play with them and understand how they see things and make sure that they get the process and they're nailing it? The best ways to do that is have a great training program, have a guide or a mentor who can help do that, have a way of coaching them, make sure you're recording their calls, make sure you're listening to those calls, and you can ramp somebody up very, very quickly once they understand the process and how important it is to stick to that process. That process should be developed over time. And by the way, it should be also dynamic. So as you encounter something that maybe one of your reps does that's great, that starts working, incorporate that into the process. Don't say, hey, you have to change. If it worked, put it in and make everybody do it. And now that process gets better. So the process should continually evolve and get better and better, but make sure that those new reps understand that they need to follow this process and they need to get, that understanding of how to work the process as strong as possible. I love telling my reps, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm here to make sure you need it. If you need anything, let me know. But I expect you to get here. And if you feel like you can't get there, let me know. And I'll make sure I give you the right support to get there.
Awesome. What are some tools or resources you recommend as you bring on these salespeople to help them develop their skills and implement the strategies you discussed? Like, how do you make sure they're on with the playbook versus like veering off in the wild?
Yeah. So I do a few things. So in weekly sales sessions, I do quizzes. So not like I'm going to grade you. I'm just going to ask you, hey, if this happens, what do you do? If this happens, how do you handle it? Hey, what if a prospect said this? How does that go? What do you say? And so I like just pinging them randomly. So first they're going to want to study up. They know that that's coming. They know they're going to have that happen. But then I also love role plays. Hey, today we're going to role play this piece, and we're going to make sure we all do this. We're going to go around the room. I'm going to be your buyer, and you do this with me, and let's see how it goes. And everybody's going to talk about each one afterwards. That role play, not only do they see how other people on the team handle things, so they might say, oh, that was really good. I need to start doing that. Or I didn't like how he said that. I want to make sure I don't say it that way. But it also creates that awesome team environment where everybody's helping each other and kind of coaching each other up. But those role plays, I have told people, you should do something at least 20 to 30 times prior to doing it with a prospect on the phone. If there's a new feature, go through it. If there is a new way of saying things, make sure you rehearse that. Do it 20 to 30 times before you ever do it with a buyer. And that way, when you're with the buyer, they won't think this is your first time talking about this, isn't it? It'll feel natural, it'll feel good to them. They're going to be very confident in you.
Awesome. What is the one biggest mistake you see people, especially, not really sales leaders as much, but maybe not really experienced sales leaders as much, but maybe startup sales leaders and founders make as they bring on sales reps and onboard them? Like maybe one or two big mistakes that they can mitigate.
I think too many times we bring on someone who has a bunch of experience and hope that they're going to be able to figure it out. So one of the biggest mistakes we can make is not having the process already in place and hoping that this hire is going to come in and save the world. This happened with me. I was starting to figure things out, starting to grow. And I'm like, well, let me just bring in this guy. So brought in a great sales guy, great background, great experience. He came in, terrible. Couldn't sell anything, wasn't doing it at all, never made one sale over several months. It was very frustrating. And so I had to let him go. But I realized it wasn't his fault, it was mine, because I hadn't trained him on the process. I haven't even processed. It was still kind of in my head. Like you said, sometimes you just do it and you haven't formally processed it. Well, that got me to formally processize it. So I created that process based on what I was doing successfully. Then I brought in two guys who didn't have nearly the same background, but walked them through how to run this process, and they sold just as well as me because we had the process in place. So the big mistake is not having something yet set, not having a good sales process, but bringing in salespeople and just hoping that they can figure it out. If you don't have something yet, nobody's going to come in and just figure it out. You need to have the right process.
I can't say this enough, man. Founder-led sales is one of the key things. In the early days, I think for the first year, I sold. You understand the messaging, you understand the, when to pivot, how to pivot, when to negotiate. You write all that down. A lot of us don't write it down, but I say, debrief after each call, take notes, write it down, and make it part of your process so you can sit down with somebody next to them and educate them. They shadow you a bunch, then you let them speak, and you interject as needed, and then let them fly solo. I think that works really well. But if as a founder, you've not sold the first 10, 15 deals yourself, you can't expect some magic sales leader to come and build it for you. It rarely ever works. You can never say never, but it rarely ever works. Awesome, man. As we come to a close here, what's one unconventional advice when it comes to sales that founders ignore but shouldn't? And what's your sales tool stack?
One unconventional thing that I was scared of initially that I can share is the phrase, "I don't know," is very powerful. And sometimes we feel like, hey, we have to be all knowing about our product and our solution. And if somebody asks a question in a sales process, I don't want to miss that answer. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. But look at what happens if we say, hey, that's a great question. I'm not sure about that one. I'm going to get that answer from you from one of our experts and get back to you. Well, what just happened? One, first of all, you're being honest, which is great. And second of all, if you do that, that means all of the other answers you did give them, you knew. So they now trust every other answer you gave them, because otherwise you would have said, I don't know, like you did on this one. So now they believe you for everything else that you said. And it makes all those answers much more powerful. So it's okay to say, I don't know. And that's one of those kind of sales things that a lot of people view salespeople as this, and it's actually the opposite. I actually talk about this on Twitter a lot, but it's okay to say, I don't know.
100%. And you feel better too. You're doing right. A lot of the times we are so concerned with sounding good, but you come across genuine when you say, I don't know. And you come across like you're going to actually research and find the right thing versus just giving them some made up BS answer. So I like that a lot. What does your sales tool stack look like? Maybe your recommendations for a seed Series A company without breaking the bank. Like, what are the key things that should be in there?
Yeah, I mean, you need a good CRM. I recommend HubSpot, by the way. That's my CRM for SaaS companies. I'm a certified SaaS or CRM partner with HubSpot. So any of my clients who come in get a 90% discount on HubSpot, which is pretty helpful. I also love Apollo is a good outbound, but there are other ones. Outreach is really good as well. I like having some sort of tool to be able to record calls. Gong obviously is great. You can use Chorus as well. So something that you can observe calls and record them and make sure that you have a good understanding of how does it impact this or that and what is the rep doing here or there. So those are definitely some of my ideas. And of course, we're remote, so we use Slack all the time. We're instant messaging back and forth on Slack a lot.
Awesome. I like Apollo a lot. I was probably one of the early companies to use it. And, I like the fact that it's a one-stop shop where you can scrape the leads or get the leads and then insert them into sequences, call, email, LinkedIn message, because, buying leads from one tool and using one for sequencing, using one for calling, and then using one for analytics. It's just so many tools, man. Like your cost per rep just goes up significantly, but moreover, it's just the cognitive overload from jumping from tool to tool is significant. So I love Apollo a lot. HubSpot, all the love. I mean, HubSpot's covered a lot in my book and community-led growth. So both great tools. Where can we find you? Where can we follow your wisdom?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me at mattwolach.com, mattwolach.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt Wolach. You'll see me there.
Awesome. Matt Wolach, mattwolach on LinkedIn, mattwolach.com. Matt, it's been a great pleasure. Thanks for educating us on sales and how to close more deals faster. Wishing you great success, my man.
Thanks, Lloyd. It was a ton of fun.
I need some traction.